The quiet observers. The Great Hall of the Galactic Federation floated in the neutral zone between star systems, a structure so vast it could be seen from neighboring planets. Inside, representatives from 200 species gathered in their designated sections. The chamber hummed with the sounds of 1,000 different languages, all filtered through translation devices that made understanding possible across biological and cultural divides. The Valdrin occupied the highest tier, their crystalline bodies reflecting light in patterns that communicated emotion. Below them sat the Thorians, massive bear-like creatures whose fur changed color with their mood. The insectoid Chitax clicked and buzzed in their section while the aquatic Narration floated in specialized tanks. Each species had earned their place through military strength, technological advancement, or economic power. And then there were the humans. They sat in a modest section near the outer ring, a position reserved for minor members. The human delegation consisted of 12 individuals led by Ambassador Marcus Chen, a man in his 50s with gray hair and eyes that seemed to calculate everything they observed. His team sat quietly, taking notes and listening more than speaking. They had been members of the Federation for 30 years, and in that time, they had contributed little that caught anyone's attention. Most species barely remembered humans existed. They came from a small yellow star in an unremarkable spiral arm. Their ships were simple. Their technology seemed generations behind the galactic standard, and their military consisted of a few dozen vessels that looked more suited for cargo transport than combat. When humans spoke during Federation debates, other species often talked over them or simply ignored their input entirely. High Chancellor Vorn stood at the central platform, his Valdrin body pulsing with urgent red patterns. His voice, translated into every language simultaneously, filled the chamber with grave news. The situation had become critical. The Kryn Empire, a militaristic civilization from the outer sectors, had begun a campaign of aggressive expansion. In the past 6 months, they had conquered 4 Federation colonies and were now threatening a dozen more. The Kryn were a species that believed strength was the only universal truth. They stood nearly 3 meters tall with thick armored skin and 4 powerful arms. Their ships were brutal things, all sharp angles and heavy armor, designed to intimidate as much as to fight. They had ignored every diplomatic attempt, responded to every warning with contempt, and their fleet grew stronger each week. Chancellor Vorn's crystalline form shifted to deeper shades of red as he outlined the threat. The Kryn had assembled a war fleet of 8,000 ships. Their supreme commander Azrath had sent a message declaring that the Federation was weak, that its multiple species made it divided and vulnerable, and that Kryn unity would sweep across Federation space like a cleansing fire. The chamber erupted in outrage. Species representatives shouted demands for action. The Thorians roared their willingness to fight. The Chitax military advisors calculated force requirements. The Narration strategist proposed defensive formations. Everyone had an opinion, and the noise level rose until Chancellor Vorn had to activate the silence field to restore order. The decision was made quickly. The Federation would assemble a coalition fleet, the largest military force gathered in 50 years. Every member species would contribute warships according to their capabilities. They would meet the Kryn at the outer reach, a strategic location that would prevent the enemy from advancing deeper into Federation territory. One by one, species representatives stood to pledge their forces. The Thorians committed 200 heavy cruisers. The Valdrin offered 150 of their advanced energy ships. The Chitax promised 500 fast attack vessels. Even minor species pledged what they could. 10 ships here, 20 there. Every contribution mattered in the face of such a threat. When the call reached the human section, Ambassador Chen rose slowly. The chamber fell into an expectant silence. Humans had been members for 3 decades but had never participated in military action. Many wondered what Earth would contribute to this historic moment. Chen's voice was calm and measured. Earth will contribute 8 vessels to the coalition fleet. We will position them as the Federation commands. The silence lasted only a moment before laughter rippled through the chamber. 8 ships. The Kryn were bringing 8,000. Even the smallest Federation members were offering more than 8 vessels. Some species had contributed more than that just as scouts. A Thorian commander named Grath stood, his brown fur tinged with the orange of amusement. Ambassador Chen, surely your planet can spare more than 8 ships. This is the largest military action in Federation history. Every member must commit their full strength. Chen's expression remained neutral. 8 ships represent our commitment to this action. We believe they will serve the Federation's needs. The laughter grew louder. A Chitax delegate made a clicking sound that the translators rendered as typical human weakness. Even Chancellor Vorn's crystalline body flickered with patterns that suggested disappointment, though he was too diplomatic to voice it directly. The vote proceeded. The coalition fleet would assemble at Staging Point Meridian in 2 weeks. Every species would bring their ships, their weapons, their warriors. They would show the Kryn that the Federation stood united and strong. 2 weeks later, the coalition fleet gathered in space. The sight was magnificent. Thousands of warships from hundreds of worlds, each one representing a different approach to warfare and technology. Thorian ships were massive and heavily armored, built to absorb punishment and deliver devastating close-range attacks. Valdran vessels were elegant, all flowing curves and energy fields. Chitax fighters swarmed in clouds of precise coordination. The fleet stretched across space like a metal sea, and floating among them were 8 human ships. They looked embarrassingly simple compared to the sophisticated vessels around them. Gray hulls with minimal external features, no obvious weapon ports, no intimidating design elements. They were roughly the size of medium cruisers, and they moved in a tight formation that never varied. Admiral Thex commanded the coalition fleet from his flagship, a Valdran dreadnought that sparkled with defensive shields. He studied the tactical display with growing confidence. 7,200 ships under his command, the largest fleet ever assembled. The Kryn would see this force and realize their mistake. His communication officer approached with a message from the human squadron. Admiral Chen requests permission to position his ships along the outer perimeter of the formation. Thex's crystalline body pulsed with the pattern for approval. Grant the request. The humans can observe from a safe distance. We would not want their 8 ships to be damaged in the main battle. The officer hesitated. Sir, should I inform them of the retreat protocols in case the battle turns against us? Thex made a sound like crystal chimes, the Valdran equivalent of a laugh. The humans will likely retreat before the first shot is fired. Do not waste time on protocols they will not follow. The human ships moved to their assigned position at the fleet's edge. From there, they had a clear view of the entire formation but were well away from the anticipated combat zone. To most observers, it looked like the humans were positioning themselves to run at the first sign of danger. 3 days passed in tense waiting. Then the Kryn arrived. 8,000 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Their ships were dark and angular, covered in weapon emplacements and armor plating. They looked like they had been designed by someone who understood only violence. Supreme Commander Azrath's face appeared on every screen in the Federation fleet. He was a terrifying sight. All armored plates and razor teeth with forearms crossed in a gesture of supreme confidence. His voice was a grinding roar that needed no translation to convey its contempt. Federation cowards. You bring many ships because individually you are weak. The Kryn are strong. We need no allies because we are superior. Surrender now and we will allow your species to serve us as slaves. Refuse and we will turn your ships into debris and your worlds into ashes. Admiral Thex responded with formal Federation protocol, declaring that the coalition would defend its territory and citizens. Azrath's only response was to open fire. The battle began with a massive exchange of weapons fire that lit up the darkness of space. Plasma beams crossed the distance between fleets. Missiles streaked through vacuum. Energy shields flared and buckled under impact. The noise of combat, transmitted through hull vibrations and electronic communications, was deafening. The Kryn fought with brutal efficiency. Their tactics were straightforward but effective. They concentrated fire on individual targets, overwhelming shields through sheer volume of weapons. Their formations were tight and disciplined. They had clearly done this many times before. The Federation fought bravely but struggled to coordinate. 200 different species meant 200 different tactical approaches. The Thorians wanted to charge forward. The Valdran preferred to maintain distance and use energy weapons. The Chitax tried to outmaneuver, while others focused on defensive positions. The coalition was powerful but lacked unity. Within the first hour, the Federation had lost 300 ships. The Kryn casualties were barely 100. The mathematics were clear. At this rate, the coalition would lose. Throughout all of this, the 8 human ships remained at the outer edge, apparently doing nothing. They moved occasionally, maintaining their formation, but their weapons stayed silent. Their sensors, however, were recording everything with an intensity that would have alarmed anyone who understood what they were seeing. On the bridge of the human flagship Endeavour, Captain Sarah Mitchell stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the data streams flow across multiple displays. She was a woman in her 40s with short dark hair and a face that revealed nothing of her thoughts. Around her, her crew worked in absolute silence, each person focused entirely on their task. Tactical analysis, Mitchell said quietly. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Ramos, pulled up the compiled data. The Kryn fight with pattern-based aggression. They have 17 primary attack formations and rotate between them based on enemy response. Their weapon recharge cycles average 4.2 seconds. Shield rotation follows a predictable sequence. Coordination is excellent, but relies on centralized command structure. They have 12 command ships directing the fleet. Mitchell nodded slowly. Weaknesses? They expect conventional resistance. Their tactics are optimized for enemies who fight the way everyone fights. Energy weapons, missile exchanges, shield-to-shield combat. They have no experience with anything else. Also, their centralized command structure creates a vulnerability. Remove the command ships and the fleet coordination degrades significantly. Estimated time before Federation collapse? Current trajectory suggests coalition defeat in approximately 4 more hours, sir. Mitchell turned to her communications officer. Send a message to Admiral Thex. Inform him that human forces are prepared to assist if the situation becomes critical. The message was sent and acknowledged, with barely concealed contempt. The Federation. Admiral's response essentially told the humans to stay out of the way and let real warriors handle the fighting. Mitchell smiled. Slightly. Understood. Continue observation. Record everything. The battle raged for another 3 hours. The Federation fleet was being pushed back, its formations breaking apart under the relentless Kryn assault. Ships exploded in bursts of light and debris. Escape pods launched from dying vessels. The Kryn were winning, and they knew it. Supreme Commander Azrath broadcast another message, this time offering surrender terms. Kneel before Kryn superiority. Disband your pathetic Federation. Accept your place as servants of a stronger species. This is your final chance. Admiral Thex's response was defiant, but those who knew Valdran body language could see the patterns of desperation forming in his crystalline structure. The Federation was losing, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Then everything changed. Captain Mitchell received a priority transmission from Earth Command. The message was brief, just 3 words and an authorization code. The moment she had been preparing for had arrived. Mitchell's expression remained calm, but something in her eyes shifted. She turned to her crew and spoke clearly. All ships, this is Endeavour Actual. Authorization code Sierra Whisper 7. Rules of engagement pattern revelation. Execute. The 8 human ships, which had been silent and still for hours, suddenly moved with purpose that seemed impossible for vessels their size. They accelerated with force that should have crushed their crews, maneuvered with precision that suggested they knew where every enemy ship would be before it got there, and took positions that placed them at perfect tactical advantage. And for the first time since joining the Galactic Federation 30 years ago, humanity showed the galaxy what human weapons could actually do. The revelation would shake the foundations of everything the Federation thought they knew about power, about technology, and about the quiet species from the small yellow star. The silent thunder. The 8 human ships moved into formation with a grace that defied their apparent simplicity. Every species in the Coalition fleet watched their sensors in confusion as the human vessels accelerated at speeds that should have been impossible for ships their size. They positioned themselves in a geometric pattern that placed them equidistant from each other, creating an invisible web across the battlefield. Captain Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, her voice steady as she issued commands. Tactical. Confirm target acquisition on all Kryn command vessels. Lieutenant Ramos worked his console with practiced efficiency. All 12 Kryn command ships identified and locked. Secondary targets assigned across the fleet. Firing solutions calculated and distributed to all human vessels. We have perfect positioning, Captain. Weapon status, all systems nominal. Railgun capacitors at full charge. Directed energy weapons online. Missile pods armed and ready. Defensive screens at maximum. We are weapons free on your command. Mitchell took one slow breath, thinking about what was about to happen. For 30 years, humanity had hidden its true capabilities. For 30 years, they had endured mockery and dismissal. They had watched other species fight and die while human ships remained silent observers. All of that had been necessary, but it had never been easy. Now the truth would be revealed, and the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. Fire, Mitchell said quietly. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for generations. The human ships did not engage in the traditional exchange of weapons fire that characterized galactic warfare. They did not launch volleys of missiles or fire-sustained energy beams. Instead, they demonstrated warfare as humanity had perfected it during centuries of conflict on Earth and in their own solar system. The Endeavour fired first. From concealed ports along its hull, 6 projectiles launched in perfect sequence. They were not missiles with warheads. They were solid metal rods, each one 3 meters long and made of tungsten carbide composite. The railgun system accelerated these projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. When the first rod struck a Kryn command ship, the kinetic energy released was equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The enemy vessel's shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and absorb explosive force, were utterly useless against solid matter moving at such extreme velocity. The rod punched through the shield as if it were not there, penetrated the hull, and released its energy inside the ship. The Kryn command vessel exploded from within, torn apart by forces its designers had never anticipated. Debris scattered across space, and suddenly 1/12 of the Kryn fleet coordination system was gone. The other 7 human ships fired simultaneously, each one targeting a different Kryn command vessel. 7 more rods crossed the battlefield at impossible speeds. 7 more command ships disintegrated in brilliant flashes of destruction. In less than 5 seconds, 8 of the 12 Kryn command vessels had been eliminated. The remaining Kryn fleet reacted with confusion. Their formations, which had been so precise and coordinated, began to waver as subordinate commanders struggled to adapt to the sudden loss of central authority. The human ships did not pause. They moved to their next targets with mechanical efficiency. The Endeavour launched a spread of what appeared to be standard missiles, but these were anything but standard. Each missile contained advanced artificial intelligence and a micro-fusion warhead. They could adjust their trajectory thousands of times per second, making them effectively impossible to intercept. 40 missiles streaked across space, weaving through defensive fire with movements that seemed almost alive. They struck 40 different Kryn warships, and 40 fusion explosions bloomed like deadly flowers. The Kryn shields absorbed some of the energy, but the concentrated force overwhelmed their defenses. Hulls buckled, systems failed, and ships began to drift powerless through space. A human vessel called the Resolute demonstrated another weapon entirely. It fired a beam of concentrated particles that was invisible to the naked eye, but devastating in effect. The beam struck a cluster of Kryn destroyers, and their electronic systems simply died. Shields collapsed, weapons powered down, life support failed. The ships became floating coffins, their crews suffocating in the darkness as their vessels failed around them. The Dauntless, another human ship, released a cloud of what looked like metallic dust. The cloud spread rapidly, guided by its own propulsion system, and enveloped a section of the Kryn formation. When the cloud made contact with enemy ships, it began to consume their hulls at the molecular level. Nanomachines, each one smaller than a grain of sand, designed to disassemble enemy vessels atom by atom. Within minutes, 30 Kryn ships were reduced to their component elements. Supreme Commander Azrath watched from his flagship as his fleet fell apart around him. His forearms gripped his command chair with enough force to dent the metal. This was impossible. His intelligence reports had said humans were weak, technologically primitive, militarily insignificant. Yet they were destroying his fleet with weapons he did not understand, using tactics he could not counter. All ships, concentrate fire on the human vessels, Azrath roared. Destroy them now! 2,000 Kryn warships turned their weapons toward the 8 human ships and fired everything they had. The space between the fleets filled with enough destructive energy to vaporize planets. Plasma beams, particle weapons, missile salvos, kinetic rounds, all of it converged on the human formation, and nothing reached its target. The human ships activated defensive systems that made Federation shields look like toys. Energy weapons struck invisible barriers and dissipated harmlessly. Missiles detonated meters away from their targets, unable to penetrate the defensive fields. Kinetic rounds were deflected by gravitic manipulation that bent space itself around the human vessels. One human ship, the Valiant, demonstrated active defense that left observers speechless. It released thousands of tiny interceptor drones, each one equipped with targeting systems and small explosive charges. The drones formed a defensive sphere around the ship and destroyed incoming threats before they could get close. The Kryn watched in horror as their weapons were intercepted and destroyed hundreds of meters from their intended target. Captain Mitchell monitored the battle with satisfaction. The human defensive systems were holding perfectly. Not a single enemy weapon had touched a human hull. Meanwhile, human weapons continued to tear through the Kryn fleet with methodical precision. "Status report," Mitchell ordered. Lieutenant Ramos consulted his displays. "All human vessels operational at 100%. No damage sustained. Enemy fleet has lost approximately 2,000 ships in the past 8 minutes. Their formation cohesion is breaking down. Remaining command vessels are attempting to organize a retreat. Predicted enemy casualties if we maintain current engagement rate. Complete destruction of Kryn fleet in approximately 12 more minutes, sir." Mitchell nodded slowly. "Open a channel to Supreme Commander Azrath. Let us give him one chance." The communication systems connected and Azrath's face appeared on Mitchell's screen. The Kryn commander looked different now. The supreme confidence was gone, replaced by something humans recognized easily. "Fear. Supreme Commander," Mitchell said calmly. "You came here believing the Federation was weak. You were wrong. You believed that multiple species working together made us vulnerable. You were wrong. You believed that the Kryn were superior because of your physical strength and military tradition. You were very wrong." Azrath said nothing, his armored face rigid with shock. "We are giving you one opportunity," Mitchell continued. "Order your remaining ships to stand down. Power down your weapons and submit to Federation authority. Your empire will be dissolved. Your conquered territories will be returned and your people will face justice for their crimes. But you will live never," Azrath snarled, though his voice lacked conviction. "The Kryn do not surrender." "Then the Kryn will cease to exist," Mitchell replied without emotion. "You have 30 seconds to decide." The channel remained open. Mitchell could see Azrath struggling with the decision. His entire worldview had been built on the idea that strength and aggression were supreme virtues. Surrender violated everything he believed, but survival was a powerful motivator, even for species as proud as the Kryn. 20 seconds passed. 25. Mitchell prepared to give the order to resume fire. At 28 seconds, Azrath spoke. "All Kryn vessels stand down. Power down weapons. We surrender." The battlefield fell silent. 6,000 Kryn ships, what remained of their once mighty fleet, went dark. Their weapons powered down. Their shields dropped. They drifted in space like defeated giants waiting for whatever came next. Throughout the Federation fleet, every species watched in stunned disbelief. The humans had done in 10 minutes what the entire coalition had failed to do in hours. 8 ships had defeated an empire. 8 vessels had demonstrated military capability beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Thex's crystalline body pulsed with colors that had no translation, emotions too complex for words. He opened a channel to Captain Mitchell, and when he spoke, his voice was shaken. "Captain Mitchell, the Federation owes humanity a debt we cannot express. What you have done here, what you have shown us, we had no idea." Mitchell's expression remained neutral. "We did what was necessary, Admiral. Nothing more. Your weapons, your technology, how long have you possessed such capabilities?" "A long time, Admiral. Longer than we have been Federation members." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. The humans had been hiding this power for 30 years. They had watched Federation species struggle and die while possessing the ability to end conflicts instantly. The question that would dominate Federation politics for years to come was already forming in Thex's mind. Why, before he could ask, Mitchell continued speaking. "Admiral, we respectfully request permission to escort the Kryn fleet to designated holding positions. We will maintain security until Federation forces can establish proper containment." "Permission granted," Thex replied automatically, still processing what he had witnessed. The 8 human ships moved among the defeated Kryn vessels like shepherds guiding a flock. Their movements were precise and confident. Any Kryn ship that showed the slightest sign of powering up weapons was immediately targeted with warning shots that demonstrated the futility of resistance. Within hours, the crisis was over. The Kryn Empire, which had threatened to tear the Federation apart, had been defeated and neutralized. Billions of lives had been saved. Dozens of worlds had been protected from conquest. And all of it had been accomplished by 8 ships from a species the galaxy had dismissed as irrelevant. The emergency session of the Federation Council was called for the following day. Every species representative was required to attend, and this time, the humans were not sitting in their modest section at the outer ring. They had been moved to a position of prominence whether they wanted it or not. Ambassador Chen stood before the assembled council, knowing that every word he said would be analyzed and debated for generations. The chamber was absolutely silent. Every being present focused entirely on the human delegation. Chancellor Vorn's crystalline body pulsed with colors that indicated confusion, curiosity, and lingering fear. Ambassador Chen, the Federation requires an explanation. You have revealed capabilities far beyond anything we knew existed. You have demonstrated weapons technology that seems impossible, according to our understanding of physics. You have hidden this power for 3 decades. We must understand why. Chen took a moment before responding, choosing his words carefully. Members of the Federation, humanity comes from a world that nearly destroyed itself. We spent thousands of years fighting each other with increasing sophistication and brutality. We developed weapons that could end all life on our planet. We came within moments of using them. He paused, letting that sink in. 200 years ago, we stood on the brink of extinction by our own hand. We had nuclear weapons, biological weapons, weapons that could alter our climate and poison our world for generations. We had the capability to destroy ourselves, and we almost did. But we stopped. At the last possible moment, we chose survival over destruction. We unified our species not through conquest, but through the recognition that we would either live together or die together. And then we made ourselves 2 promises. What promises? Chancellor Vorn asked quietly. Chen's voice was firm. First, that we would never again be vulnerable to extinction. We would develop defensive capabilities so powerful that no threat, external or internal, could destroy us. We spent 2 centuries building those capabilities. The weapons you saw today are the result of that effort. And the second promise, that we would never use our power to conquer others. That we would seek peace first, always, and reserve our strength only for moments when there was no other choice. We joined the Federation because we wanted to prove to ourselves that we could be more than warriors. We wanted to be partners, explorers, builders of something greater than ourselves. A Thorian representative named Crag stood, his fur dark with confusion. But you watched us die. You had the power to save lives, and you did nothing until the last moment. How is that seeking peace? Chen's expression showed genuine pain. It is the hardest thing we have ever done. Every human commander who watched Federation ships burn while we remained inactive carries that weight. But we were terrified of what revealing our power would do. We have studied galactic history. We have seen what happens when one species becomes too dominant. Either they become conquerors or others unite to destroy them. We did not want either outcome. So you manipulated us, a Chitax delegate clicked accusingly. We gave you a choice. Chen corrected gently. We wanted you to know us as people, not as a threat. We wanted genuine partnership based on mutual respect, not fear of our weapons. We hoped that when the time came to reveal our strength, you would understand that we had always chosen restraint. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species demanded that humanity be expelled from the Federation immediately, arguing that such deception could not be tolerated. Others insisted that humanity's actions had saved the Federation and proved their commitment to peace. Still others proposed that humans be given military authority over all Federation forces. The debate raged for hours, but gradually a consensus emerged. Humanity had demonstrated both overwhelming power and remarkable restraint. They had possessed the capability to dominate the galaxy for decades but had chosen not to. They had watched others struggle but had not imposed their will. And when they finally acted, it was only to protect lives and preserve the Federation. The vote came near midnight by station time. By a margin of 73%, the Federation chose to not only keep humanity as members, but to offer them a new designation. Humans would be recognized as the Federation's shield, protectors who would intervene only when conventional forces were insufficient to address existential threats. Humanity accepted the role with one condition. They would begin sharing defensive technology with other species gradually, over decades, to ensure that the Federation did not become dependent on human protection. The goal was partnership, not dominance. 6 months later, the galaxy had adjusted to its new reality. Human ships now patrolled the most dangerous border regions, their presence preventing conflicts before they could begin. The Kryn Empire had been dissolved peacefully, its territories transitioning to local governance under Federation oversight. Species that had once dismissed Earth now sent delegations seeking trade agreements and military cooperation. But the most profound change was not political or military. It was philosophical. The galaxy had learned that the greatest strength was not in weapons or fleets or devastating power. It was in the wisdom to know when to use that power and the courage to choose restraint when possible. Far beyond the galaxy, in the empty darkness between stars, an ancient intelligence detected the energy signatures from the battle at Outer Reach. It analyzed the data with consciousness that predated most civilizations. It had been moving toward this galaxy, drawn by the abundant life and resources. But now it paused. The weapons and defensive capabilities it detected suggested a level of technological sophistication and military coordination far beyond what it typically encountered. The entity calculated probabilities and threat assessments. This galaxy would be more difficult than anticipated. There were easier targets elsewhere in the universe where resistance would be minimal. Silently, without any beings in the galaxy even knowing it had been approaching, the ancient threat altered its course and moved away, seeking prey that would not fight back so effectively. In his office on Earth, Ambassador Chen received an automated alert from the Deep Space Monitoring Network. An unknown entity had approached, scanned the galactic region, and departed. He read the report carefully, noted the details, and filed it in the classified archives. Humanity's greatest victory had just occurred, and no one except a few humans would ever know it had happened. They had won a battle without firing a shot, protected billions of lives without those lives ever knowing they were threatened, and demonstrated that sometimes the best weapon was the one that never needed to be used. Chen looked out the window at Earth below. The blue and green world that had given birth to a species capable of both tremendous destruction and remarkable wisdom. Humanity had revealed its true strength to the galaxy, and that strength was not merely in weapons or technology. It was in the choice to seek peace, even while being prepared for war. It was in the wisdom to hide power rather than display it arrogantly. It was in the courage to watch others struggle while knowing that revealing the truth too soon might cause more harm than good. The galaxy had stopped to watch when humanity revealed its military force. But what truly left them in silence was the realization that humans had possessed that force all along and had chosen not to use it. That choice, more than any weapon, was what made humanity truly strong. And in the darkness of space, the human ships continued their silent patrol, watching and protecting, hoping they would never need to reveal just how much more they were still hiding. The greatest deterrent, after all, was not the weapon you displayed. It was the weapon your enemies suspected you possessed but could never quite confirm. And humanity had become masters of that particular form of strength, learned through hard experience and maintained through disciplined restraint. The galaxy slept peacefully, protected by guardians who preferred silence to glory, and that silence spoke louder than any thunder ever could.